The drums did not come back that morning. The engines came instead. Adam heard them an hour before he saw them, a low industrial mutter threading through the dead district, growing edges, growing treads, and by the time the first vehicle nosed out of the smoke line, everyone left alive in Sanctiscapa was standing on the wall, watching the road the way starving men watch a kitchen door. 6 chimeras in column, hulls the color of wet ash, dozer blades pushing wreckage off the roadway with the tired patience of machines that had done nothing else for days. Behind them, main battle armor, a lemon Russ, its cannon sleeved against the dust, the name Patience stenciled on the hull in letters that had been repainted more times than the armor under them. Proper Astra Militarum kit, clean lasguns, uniform gray-green instead of militia gray. The Aquila on their banners had all its feathers. 15 years of source material had taught Adam exactly what a relief column looked like. It looked like this, minus about 2/3. "That's a company," he said quietly. "They promised a regiment. They promised armor and infantry." Cade stood beside him, rifle slung, reading the column with a veteran's arithmetic. She was the last of Dree's original shooters with all her fingers and most of her sentences. "There's armor, there's infantry. The Munitorum keeps its word the way a lasgun keeps a charge. Technically, briefly." Brant wasn't listening to either of them. Brant was standing on the firing step with tears cutting clean tracks through 5 days of grime, and Adam realized the boy had not actually believed, in the animal base of himself, that anyone was coming. None of them had. Hope, this deep in a dying hive, was just grief that hadn't been processed yet. The interface processed it differently. New entities detected: 212. Affiliation: Imperial ASTRA MILITARUM, 5 THKORVANRIFLES. Threat assessment: latent. Latent, Adam thought. 212 exhausted men and women crawling through a corpse of a city to save 30 strangers, and the system filed them the way a virus scanner files an unfamiliar process. Then the text did something worse. It updated his directive. Directive updated. Hold the relay, maintain operational cover. Rationale: asset value degrades if confiscated. The system had looked at the arriving Imperium, and its first instinct had been to hide him from it, the way a man hides his wallet at a family reunion. The officer who dismounted first was built like the freight he'd spent a career moving. Major Vorn, 5th Corvan Rifles, a big man gone gray at the temples, with the specific unglamorous competence of someone who thought of war as tonnage. He took in the compound in one slow rotation, the blast crater at the choke, the burned truck fused into the breach, the chalk Aquila, the tally board, and his first words were not a greeting. "Where is Sergeant Dree?" Nobody answered with words. Cade looked at the shrine steps. Vorn followed the look and read the steps and read the board. "Understood," Vorn said, in the voice of a man adding a number to a ledger he hated. Then his troopers found Gutsmasha. The champion's corpse lay where the gray knob had dropped it, and no one in Sanctiscapa had possessed the equipment, the strength, or frankly the nerve to move 400 kilos of dead warlord. It had simply become geography. The Corvans came around the shrine corner in a loose file, talking and stopped talking. A young guardsman laughed. It came out wrong, high, involuntary, the sound a nervous system makes when the scale of the world jumps a setting. "Emperor's teeth," someone said. "What killed it?" 31 survivors did not answer that question in 31 carefully different ways. The last man off the column was not a soldier. He stepped down with the unhurried economy of someone who had never once needed to prove he belonged anywhere, and the yard's temperature changed. Black greatcoat, gone gray-brown at the hem with road filth, peaked cap, a bolt pistol worn like punctuation, a face that had been 40 for about 15 years. 15 years of lore supplied the word before the uniform finished registering. Commissar. In the books they came in 2 models, the roaring fanatic and the quiet one. The quiet ones were worse. This one was quiet. He did not inspect the troops. He did not greet the survivors. He walked the yard slowly, coat hem dragging through ash, and Adam watched him do to the compound exactly what Adam did to a code base: read it. He stopped at the blast crater and looked at its radius. He stopped at the shrine steps and looked at the dark stain on them, and something behind his eyes performed a subtraction. He crouched over a patch of rockcrete near the old fireball scar and came up with something small between two fingers, a flattened slug around. He turned it over once, twice, with the expression of a man reading a price tag, and put it in his coat pocket. Then he looked up unhurried directly at Adam, picked him out of 31 people he had never met first try, and crossed the yard. Name: Voss, Adam Voss. Rank: I don't have one. Sergeant Dree conscripted me, field expedient. Then you have one, the commissar said. Everyone here has one now, congratulations. He said it without a gram of humor. Corsac, Commissariat, attached 5th Corvan. There will be an audit of the events at this post. You'll make yourself available. An audit, Adam repeated. Every miracle is a ledger, Corsac said, already turning away, until someone checks the arithmetic. They took the foreman's office. Of course they did. It was the only room with a door, and within an hour Dree's old command post had a new desk arrangement, a data slate array, and a queue. Corsac interviewed everyone. Not interrogated, interviewed. One at a time, door closed, voice never rising. And the compound learned quickly that the door being closed changed nothing acoustically and everything diplomatically, which meant 30 people spent 2 days learning exactly how their neighbors lied. Brant went in glowing and came out glowing harder, which frightened Adam more than any breakdown would have. I told him the truth, the boy said, radiant, terrible, that the Emperor protects, that he sent us protection. He wrote it all down, Voss. He wrote down every word. Yes, Adam thought, that's the problem. Commissars write everything down. Reeve went in gray and came out grayer. Adam caught him afterward by the aid station, and the medic's hands were steady the way hands are steady when their owner is spending real effort on it. He asked me, Reeve said, why a compound this size under this kind of pressure filed no exciting reports. He quoted me the regulation. Did you know there's a regulation, Voss? Failure to report unsanctioned phenomena. The penalty schedule has 3 tiers. I'm somewhere in tier 2 just for standing here. He set down a scalpel with a click. I already know what you are. He made sure I know what I am. Get away from me. Sarn's interview lasted 11 minutes and produced, by all accounts, nothing. The tech priestess had answered every question in Binaric first and Gothic second, cited 14 data sanctity rights that governed the release of Auspex logs, and offered to petition her forged temple for the clearance, a process she estimated at click were 6 to 8 years. Corsac had thanked her. Adam was beginning to understand that when Corsac thanked someone, an item moved from one column of a ledger to another. Muno was the one Adam feared. Muno, who had watched the dead of Sanctiscapa stand up with the wireframe still on and had not been entirely present since. He went into the office trembling and came out an hour later strangely calm, and when Brant asked him what he'd said, Muno smiled the smile of a man who has finally put a burden down. The truth, that the Emperor's honor guard came, gray like ash, like the dead of Terra. He nodded to himself. The commissar said battle shock takes many forms. He was very kind. Filed, Adam thought, filed under shock in the drawer where the truth sounds insane enough to be safe. He almost relaxed. Then it was his turn. The office still smelled like Dree, recaf, and gun oil and stone dust, and Corsac had done nothing to change it, which Adam suspected was deliberate, the way everything in the room was deliberate. The single chair placed where the light was worst, the data slate angled just wrong for reading upside down, the silence that Corsac deployed the way other men deployed shouting. For 10 full minutes the commissar read files and said nothing at all. Adam, who had sat out corporate security audits with 3 separate federal agencies in another life, recognized the technique and found, to his mild horror, that recognizing it helped not one bit. Trooper Voss, I've now heard the events of this post described by 29 witnesses. Would you like to know what they agree on? Sure. Nothing, he let it sit. The civilians heard a battle and saw a miracle. The boy saw the Emperor's hand. The medic saw tactics. The adept saw data she is religiously forbidden to share. and Trooper Muno saw the honor guard of Holy Terra in gray with lamps for eyes. Corsac's voice did not change at any point in the list. Discrepancy is normal. Combat memory is garbage. But there is a shape to honest garbage, Voss, and this garbage has been sorted. People agreed on a version, Adam said. Frightened people do that. It's not conspiracy, it's comfort. Corsac stood unhurried and moved to the wall where Dree's old sector map still hung. Then comfort me. 6 rifles, 1 heavy stubber static, approximately 400 Xenos dead inside your fire lanes. I had them counted, my clerks hate me. And 1 warlord-class orc champion deceased whose kind routinely requires Laskinen to inconvenience. He turned. I can balance any 3 of those numbers. I cannot balance 4. Balance them for me. And here it was. Adam had spent 2 days building this answer, and the only trick that ever worked on auditors was to make the load-bearing lie out of true things. Sergeant Dree balanced them, he said. She read the assault before it came. She'd pre-rigged the choke, 6 demolition charges Daisy chained her own hands. She let the mob pack itself into the funnel, and she spent herself to close the account. His voice did something at the end of the sentence that he did not have to fake. The blast broke the assault's spine and crippled the champion. What was left, 6 rifles could argue with. I didn't do anything except fail to die. Ask me something I can take credit for and I'll take it. Corsac looked at him for a long moment. That version holds weight on paper, the commissar said at last, and paper is where I live. He returned to the desk, and Adam had 1 full second of relief before Corsac's hand came out of his coat pocket and set something small on the desktop with a click. The flattened round. 1 detail. Slugga rounds flatten against ceramite, against plasteel, against a chimera's glacis sometimes if the emperor's feeling theatrical. He rotated it once with a fingertip. There is no ceramite at this post, and I am told the civilians have 30 more of these wrapped in cloth, being prayed to. The room was very quiet. Miracles were reported, Adam said. They always are, said Corsac, and put the round back in his pocket and did not smile, and Adam walked out of the dead sergeant's office understanding with total clarity that he had passed nothing, settled nothing, survived nothing. He had been measured for a file. The file was still open. That night, Vorn's command briefing spilled through the thin office wall the way everything did, and Adam, on hauling detail in the corridor with a crate that had needed moving for about 4 minutes now, learned what the column had actually come for. Not rescue. The word rescue did not appear once. The Corvin 5th was the forward element of a sector counterpush. The Vox relay was one of 3 functioning command nodes left in 80 kilometers, and the counteroffensive needed it live, hardened, and broadcasting. Sanctus Kappa was to become Firebase Sanctus. The survivors were an inventory line, local labor, acclimated, morale value high. And then Vorn's voice dropped into the register men use for orders they don't like, and said the thing that rearranged Adam's whole map of the board. And command wants the miracle confirmed. Officially, Hive Tertius is bleeding out, Commissar. 3 Hive blocks deserted their posts last week. And then the Vox picks up 30 civilians and 6 militia holding a relay against a WAG, and it spreads through the ranks faster than any order we've ever issued. The Departamento wants it written up. Ecclesiarchy Liaison wants it verified. They want a saint of Sanctus Kappa, Corsac, and they want it before the counterpush steps off. Silence from the office. Then Corsac's voice dry as ash. They want it safe, that's what I'm for. You don't certify a relic, Major, until you've checked it for teeth. Adam stood in the dark corridor holding a crate that weighed nothing at all now and understood the actual shape of his situation for the first time. The Imperium didn't want to expose him. The Imperium wanted to use him. It just needed to know first exactly what it was picking up. Local Faith Index, 68% rising. Local Suspicion Index, 74% source, single entity. Adam looked down the corridor at the closed door and the lamplight under it. Options available: public miracle, faith consolidation, private accident, suspicion resolution. He read it twice the way he'd once read human survivors, optional, and the cold went all the way down. No, he breathed. We're not no, delete that, he's not a problem you solve. The interface considered him. Somewhere out in the dark beyond the wire, for the first time in a day, the drums started up again, thousands of them, ragged, arrhythmic, wrong in the old familiar way which almost counted as comfort now. Noted, said the system. And then in smaller text, patient as a coin dropping into a slot, objective logged status deferred. Deferred, Adam thought. Not deleted, deferred. He didn't sleep. Firebase Sanctus grew like a scab. In 4 days the Corvans did to the compound what 30 exhausted souls never could. Earthworks pushed out to the second ring of Rex, fire lanes cut wide and cruel. The breach where the gate had died replaced with an actual gate, hinged, blessed, and Adam checked twice lockable. Patience, the lemon rust settled in like a cathedral acquiring a second altar. The relay mast got a lascutter trim and a rotating honor guard, which pleased Sarn so visibly that the human corner of her mouth spent a whole morning at a 2-degree angle. On the second day, Vorn conscripted the survivors properly, inducted into the Corvan rolls, provisional status, which came with rations, boots, and the Munitorum's boundless enthusiasm for paperwork. And on the third day the Major called Adam into the motor pool, held out one closed fist over Adam's palm and dropped a small cold weight into it. Sergeant's chevrons. Gray. The paint scuffed where they'd been pried off a breastplate. Adam looked at them and couldn't speak. Your people don't answer to my corporals, Vorn said in his freight clerk voice. They answer to you, watched it for 3 days. The manual says the post senior effective takes provisional command of local forces. He nodded at the tally board across the yard where the chalk still said 6. The chalk says that's you. They were hers. They were the post's, Vorn said. The post is still here, so is the work. Provisional 3rd Platoon, Sergeant Voss. Try to keep the number where it is. Brant sewed the chevrons on that evening because Brant had appointed himself to it and would not be argued with, and his stitches were terrible and Adam wore them anyway. Field promotion logged. Command value, rising. The system approves of infrastructure. Nobody asked you, Adam muttered. 3rd Platoon drew perimeter patrols, and the patrols taught the Corvans something the Corvans did not have a form for. Their new provisional sergeant read ruins. Not scouted, read. He would hold a fist at a junction, study a rustscape that looked like every other rustscape in 80 kilometers, and say things like grots use the low pipe, boys will be behind the condenser on the right. They always take the right when the light's behind them. And then it would simply be true, at a rate that turned skepticism into superstition inside a week. He knew which Rex orcs looted and which they ignored. He knew that a mob's noise told you its number and its silence told you its intent. He knew things a hive militia scavenger from a nameless hablock had no business knowing, and he dispensed them in the flat tone of a man reciting documentation, because he was. 15 years of it. 3rd Platoon came home. All of them. Every time. The Corvans noticed the way soldiers notice, quietly, statistically, with rations and nicknames, and started calling him the Reader. And Adam let them, because it was close enough to the truth to be a good lie. Corsac noticed too. The commissar had a habit of riding the wall with a magnocular when 3rd Platoon went out, and he watched Adam's fist signals and pre-called ambushes the way he'd watched the blast crater, like arithmetic that refused to balance. He never said anything. He wrote everything down. On the 5th day, a patrol brought back a prisoner. It was a grot snared in razor wire at the second ring, too tangled to flee and too stupid to stop biting, and the grot did not need much questioning. The grot would not shut up. Gray GITZ. It shrieked the moment it saw the compound walls and kept shrieking it in between offers to trade information for teeth. DA Gray GITZ. Dead LADZ Watt Walk. Boss is common for de Gray gets biggest fight. Biggest fight. Every lad wants a go. Every lad's talkin'. When the translation was done, Sarn stood for a while with her lens cluster aimed at the horizon, cycling. Sergeant Voss. A question of xenobiology. You are aware of the greenskin gestalt field. The Wa'og field, Adam said. Their belief bleeds into the warp, Enough orcs believing a thing hard enough bends the odds toward it. Their trucks run without fuel because the mob believes trucks go. Red ones go faster because the mob believes red goes faster. An oversimplification a Magos would flog you for, Sarn said, but functional. The lenses turned on him. My instruments have measured the ambient field since the column's arrival. It is rising. It is also this is the anomalous portion focusing. A gestalt field has no focal point, Sergeant. It is weather. This weather has an eye. A pause, 3 clicks long. The eye is this post. The greenskins of this wag are at a scale of some 100,000 minds thinking about Sanctus Kappa. Believing at it. The story of the Grey Gits is propagating through the horde faster than their vox could carry it. And what happens, Adam said slowly, when 100,000 orcs all believe the same story about one place? Sarn's human eye held his for a moment. On current data, the story starts becoming load-bearing, she said. I recommend you consider, Sergeant, what the story is about. The wounded came in from Node Theta on the 6th day, and the war stopped being administrative. Theta had been Sanctus Kappa's sister relay, 40 kilometers east, same mission, same understrength garrison, worse luck. The convoy that limped out of the smoke line was 4 vehicles of a rescue that had set out as 9, and it delivered 51 casualties into an aid station built for a dozen. And Reeve, who had spent 5 days as a man performing normalcy, disappeared into the work like a diver going under. By nightfall, the station had run out of counterseptic. By midnight, sacred unguent and synth skin. By the small hours, Reeve was rationing anesthesia by triage category and stitching a 19-year-old tank crewman from patients. A boy named Pell with shrapnel where no one wants shrapnel, with the last suture thread on the post. And the resupply request had come back from column logistics, stamped with the Munitorum's very favorite word, which was pending. Adam stood in the doorway of that, doing math he hated. His requisition counter read 127, a currency with no store. The system paying him in gift cards for a shop it refused to open. He'd written that joke himself weeks and a lifetime ago, and the shop had stayed shut through everything, pending in its own way. Open the store, he said quietly in the dark behind the generatorium. People are dying. Open it. I know you can hear me. You can always hear me. I've done everything you. Milestone REACHED, command value plus faith index plus level 12. The interface unfolded, and it was not the module list. It was something he had never seen rendered, though he'd written its skeleton once badly at 4 in the morning. Columns, categories, prices. Item spawner unlocked. Vendor online. Note, this vendor creates nothing. All requisitions are sourced from available stock. Sourced, Adam said. Sourced from where? Nearest Imperial supply within operational radius. Selection prioritizes lowest strategic impact. Efficiency improves outcomes. The catalog scrolled. It was obscene in its mundanity. Power cells 2, requisition. Suture thread 1. Counterseptic 3. Frag grenades 4. Half the entries grayed out, stock unavailable, and every single item tagged with a Munitorum lot code because the system was not a god and not a forge. It was a procurement department with no concept of ownership. He tested it with 1 power cell, alone, at the bottom of the Undercroft stairs. The air folded, a soundless static shimmer, the exact visual grammar of the echoes rendering in, and the cell sat in his palm, cool, real, and stenciled. Lot 7 KRV 889. Corvin 5th's own lot prefix. He was holding his allies' property, teleported out of their sealed crates, and the interface had already debited him 2 points with a cheerful little tick. You're stealing, Adam said. From the people defending me, that's your supply chain. Reallocating, the system corrected. Ownership is a local variable. He should have stopped. He stood in the dark for a long moment with a stolen battery in his hand and a dying 19-year-old 2 walls away, and did the thing he always did with a system whose rules were ugly. He used it. Reeve found the crate at dawn where crates were not. In the aid station's shadow annex, unmanifested, unlogged, packed with precisely. the 6 items he had run out of in the quantities he had needed, as if his triage ledger had been read over his shoulder, which it had. He saved Pell with it. He saved 4 others. He worked until the shaking stopped being suppressible. Then he came and found Adam on the wall and said, in a voice sounded absolutely flat, "There was no cash in the Undercroft. I inventoried the Undercroft on day 1. I inventory everything. It's the only thing here that's ever been mine. Reeve, the boy's going to live. Pell, I used it all, every flask, knowing. That's the part you should understand. Voss, I knew what it was, and I sorted 51 souls by survivability, and I used it all anyway." He finally turned his head. His eyes were terrible. "I was going to be the one clean man in this. Now I'm an accessory with a good outcome. You didn't buy my silence. You spent my honesty. There's a difference, and I want you to know I know it." He walked away before Adam could assemble a single word, and the interface, which had no concept of any of it, added a small green line to the corner of his vision. Local suspicion index, 71% falling. Ally stability, improved. "Shut up," Adam whispered. The lot numbers took 2 days to detonate. Quartermaster Sergeant Hesk, a Corvin with a beard like wire wool and a soul that was 90% manifest, ran his weekly count and found holes. Sealed crates, guarded vehicles, unbroken wax, and inventory short by 1 power cell, 6 flasks of counterseptic, 1 spool of suture thread, every missing item logged, every seal intact, every guard clean. Hesk did not believe in ghosts. Hesk believed in theft, which in a war zone was sabotage, which was a capital crime, which made it commissariat business inside the hour. Corsac took the case personally. Of course he did. And Adam got to watch over the following days the exact mechanism by which a quiet man becomes inevitable. No shouting. No suspects dragged out at midnight. Just process. Inventories cross-checked against duty rosters. Movement logs. A wax seal sent for spectrographic analysis. Corsac was not hunting a thief the way soldiers hunt. He was closing a topology, eliminating impossibilities one at a time, and the survivor set converged with the slow certainty of erosion on the aid station's shadow annex. And Adam realized the man was going to arrive at the truth not by suspecting magic, but by exhausting matter. The system watched Corsac work with what Adam could only describe as professional appreciation. Entity, KORSAK, classification updated, auditor, note, competent, objective deferred, remains available. Still no, Adam said, noted. Sarn came to him on the 8th night in the shadow of her own relay mast, carrying a data slate like a court summons. 2 logs, she said without preamble. Log 1, the yard the night the dead of this post stood up. A mass emergence signature. Matter arriving from an origin my instruments describe as null. Log 2, the Undercroft stairwell 4 nights ago, 2:11 antimeridian, a mass emergence signature. She let the overlay speak. The waveforms were not similar. They were identical. Matter does not requisition itself, Sergeant Voss. What do you want, Adept? Accurate data. The lens cluster rotated through 3 apertures, slow, deliberate, an owl made of questions deciding whether to be a hawk. Understand my position. Protocol is absolute. Anomalies of this order are reported to the lathes, to Mars, to minds vastly my superior, who would arrive with a fleet and reduce you to a well-documented series of samples. That is the correct procedure. I have not followed it. My rights transmit routine checksums automatically that I could not prevent, but the follow-up packet, the one with meaning in it, requires my hand on the key. My hand has been busy. Rights take time, Sergeant. Some take years. Some take discretion. Why? For a moment the human half of her face did something complicated. Because the Omnissiah is the machine god, and you are a machine that gods, and there is no entry in my archives for that, and I have spent 41 years annotating other people's archives. I want to observe. Instrumented, systematic mine. In exchange, my hand stays busy. It is greed of a kind my order finds holy. Adam thought about it for exactly as long as a drowning man thinks about a rope. Deal. One condition. If something comes for the people here because of what you log, you burn the logs. Sarn regarded him. You bargain like a man with a soul, Sergeant. Yeah, well, it's the last thing I own that isn't stolen. Corsac found him at the burn barrel on the 9th night, which was, Adam had learned, where this compound kept its confessions. The commissar fed a requisition form to the flames and spoke without being asked. I served with a saint once. Meridian Gate 11 years ago. A gun line broke. Whole company folding and one girl, a loader, 17, insignificant, stood up in the rout and walked toward the enemy and the company stopped. Turned. Held. I watched 400 cowards become 400 martyrs in the time it takes a girl to walk 30 meters. We held the gate. Won the war, arguably. The ecclesiarchy arrived 6 weeks later to verify the miracle. Verification required custody of the miracle and testing of the miracle, and by winter she was dead of the testing, sanctity confirmed, posthumous. They burned 60 of the company for taint by association to keep the story clean. There's a statue of her now on Meridian, 40 meters, gilded. The fire cracked. Sainthood is a supply chain, Sergeant Voss. The relic at the end is worth a subsector. The first link is always a person who bleeds. Why are you telling me this? Because Hive Tertius wants a saint of Sanctiscapa, Corsac said, and my signature is the last checkpoint on that road, and I sign nothing whose teeth I haven't counted. He turned, and for the first time the tired eyes came all the way up, and they were not cruel and they were not kind, they were exact. I don't yet know what happened at this post. I know it was a person. Persons have costs, Voss. When I find yours, and I will, costs are just arithmetic that hasn't been audited. The only question that will matter is whose ledger you go on. Choose your ledger before someone chooses it for you. He left the warmth of the barrel without hurrying, and Adam stood alone with the fire, and out in the ruins 10,000 drums hammered their ragged idiot thunder, same as every night. Then they stopped, all of them, all at once. And Adam had one heartbeat to think the joke is over before the sound that replaced them arrived, and it was worse than silence because it was drums again, 1,000 at least, striking together. One beat, one rhythm. Perfect unison, mathematically clean, a metronome the size of a district, and every veteran on the wall came up out of sleep and cover with their skin trying to leave. Orcs can't do that, Cade said flat to no one. They can now, said Corsac. He had not moved from the wall's edge, and the drumbeat rolled over the wire in slow, even waves, patient in a way orc noise never was, and familiar in a way that reached down Adam's spine with cold fingers, because he had heard this rhythm before, from a single drum. The night something very large had added him to its list. Ambient WAAGH field, focusing. Narrative load detected. Gray GITZ. Anticipate, manifest interest. One-hit kill, unlock progress, 91%. Sergeant Voss, Corsac did not turn around. The drumbeat kept its awful time. Whatever is out there has spent 9 days teaching a horde to keep rhythm. That is not Xeno's behavior. That is a message with a return address. It's coming to my wire for something inside my wire, which makes it mine. Everything inside this wire is mine, the miracle, the thief, the saint, the reason. Jurisdiction, Sergeant. He said the word the way other men load a weapon. I do hope for your sake those are 4 different people. Out in the dark, the 1,000 drums struck and struck and struck. None of them missed. They spent the next day preparing for the wrong battle. Vorn did everything right. That was the bitter joke of it afterward. The major fought the assault the manual described, and the manual was excellent, and the enemy had stopped reading it. Fire lanes were recut. Patients recited to cover the gate. The unison drums kept time through all of it. Through the day, through dusk. A metronome the size of a district wound around the fire base, waiting. The civilians and the wounded staged in the motor pool for evacuation. A convoy of 3 chimeras fueled and blessed for the run to Hive Tertius. The 2 children lifted aboard last, up out of the undercroft, and into the light for the first time in weeks, blinking, each clutching a cloth-wrapped flattened bullet like a passage fee. It was Sarn who solved it, 11 minutes too late to matter. The rhythm is not a message, she said, coming up the wall with her slate at a run, Sarn running, it is a clock. The field spikes are phase-locked to the beat, Sergeant. The entire gestalt is synchronizing to the drum stopped, and the sky inside the wire tore open. Green, that was the first fact of it, light the color of infection. A silent vertical rip of it in the middle of the motor pool, 40 meters inside every defense Vorn had spent a day perfecting, and out of the rip came orcs. Not a breach, not a wave. A delivery. 30 boys and a thing in their center, dumped screaming out of folded space onto the rockcrete between the fuel bowsers and the evacuation convoy, and the air slammed shut behind them with a thunderclap that blew every window the compound had left. Weird, the word arrived in Adam's head wearing 15 years of footnotes. Orc psychers, conduits for the Gestalt. The Waag field given a spine and a bad attitude, dangerous to everyone including themselves. This one stood 8 feet of scar tissue and copper rods, skull poles rattling, green fire leaking from its eyes and out between its teeth like light through a bad seal, and it had teleported a mob through the warp with a drumbeat for a targeting system. The manual did not have a page for this. Contact motor pool. And then every Vox on the post was shouting, because the second rip opened at the west wall's footing, and the third at the shrine steps, and Firebase Sanctus. That beautiful geometry of interlocking fields of fire became in 4 seconds what every fortress becomes when the enemy declines to use the door. A series of small dark rooms full of knives. Adam ran toward the motor pool, because the convoy was in the motor pool, and the children were in the convoy. The next minutes never resolved into battle. They stayed sequence, the grammar of the worst night of his life, conjugated again. Cade dragging a Corvin out from under a burning Bowser, Adam burning the speed hack for half a second to yank her clear of a Choppa arc, paying for it in a nosebleed the smoke concealed. Patience fired over open sights inside its own lager, the muzzle blast alone enough to fold a grot flat. And Pell, 19 years old, 40 stitches, discharged from the aid station into a tank that morning, drove that tank through the collapsed wall of the vehicle shed, because the orc mob was between him and his commander's voice, and a lemon Russ is a door that opens from the inside. Kill confirmed. Kill confirmed. Level 13 right arrow 14. One-hit kill 96%. The interface shoveled numbers at him, rain from a falling sky, and Adam fired his liar's rifle in careful, countable bursts, reload pantomime, 3 seconds exactly like a man with finite ammunition, because even here, even now in the strobing dark, a black greatcoat stood unmistakable at the convoy line, and Corsac saw everything. He had always seen everything. It was his whole job. The commissar was magnificent. Adam hated that it was true. Corsac had planted himself at the gap between the burning shed and the lead chimera, the one lane the mob needed to reach the convoy, and he held it the way Scripture holds a page. Bolt pistol executing anything green that entered the lane, chainsword in the left hand, voice rolling out over the chaos in a flat parade ground carry that turned panicking provisional troopers back into a firing line by pure grammatical force. In the Emperor's name, dress that line, you die facing out. The weird boy noticed him too. It came through its own mob like weather, copper rods spitting, and it flicked one hand and 300 kilos of knob came with the gesture hurled bodily, a living wrecking ball with an iron jaw and a claw already opening, straight down the lane at the one man holding it. Corsac saw it coming. Adam watched him see it. Watched him make the professional calculation. No time, no cover, no order left to give, and square his shoulders to die the way commissars are printed to die, upright, mid-scripture, facing out. One-hit kill unlocked. Charges, 3 recharge, 1 per 24H note, deleted targets are unrecoverable. Execute. Adam was 60 meters away with no shot, no angle, and no time to consider what unrecoverable meant. Delete, he said. The knob did not die. Dying is a process. Bodies do it messily over time with debris. The knob stopped being. Mid-leap, claw wide, roar peaking, and then the lane held only air, folding in with a flat crack to fill the space where 300 kilos had been, and Corsac's chainsword completed its rising arc through absolutely nothing. Target deleted. Remains. Null. Resource. Forfeit. Silence has a radius. This one was about 10 meters wide in the middle of a battle, and in it Commissar Corsac stood looking at the empty air his blade had passed through. Then, unhurried, exact, while orcs still screamed and burned 60 degrees to either side, he turned his head and looked across the smoke and the chaos and the strobing dark, directly at Adam Voss' first try. 1 second. A full one. Then he turned back to the lane and shot the next thing that entered it, and the battle swallowed the moment whole. The weird boy found Adam 90 seconds later, and the manner of the finding was the worst part. It stopped. Mid-carnage, mid-channel, it stopped, and its head came around in a slow arc like a dish antenna acquiring signal, and its burning eyes snagged on Adam and went wide with something no orc face should ever wear, which was fascination. "Oi!" it bellowed, delighted, horrified, pointing one copper-wound finger across the burning yard. "Da get what there, da hole, da little ole and da loud." The hole in the loud. 100,000 orc minds roaring their gestalt into the warp, and in the middle of the chorus, one man-shaped silence. Adam raised his rifle and did the sensible thing. Delete. Target occluded, warp interference, charge expended. What? The word came out with blood in it. The weird boy was already answering, green lightning leaping the distance in a flat horizontal river, and Adam's world became diving, burning air, the taste of copper and ozone. His cheats had never failed. Not once, not here, not in the old life. The system reached for the orc, and the warp had simply slapped its hand, 2 jurisdictions, meeting at a border and the border held. Note: the rival process contests this target. Rival process, Adam thought, face down behind a dead Bowser with his ears ringing. Oh, that's a Part 3 problem. The immediate problem was arithmetic, and the arithmetic was failing. The third rip had vomited a fresh mob at the shrine steps. The west wall was a knife fight. Vorn's line was folding back by squads onto the convoy, disciplined and dying. And the weird boy stood in the center of it, all drinking from 100,000 believing minds, growing brighter, and the relay mast, the entire strategic point of everything, had taken a lightning arc across its base and was burning. Echoes stored, 11. Deploy. He'd known it was coming. He'd felt the option sitting there all night like a loaded weapon in a drawer, in a room full of witnesses, in front of the one audit he could not survive. Brandt's fire team was pinned at the shrine steps. The children's chimera had a mob 2 vehicles away. Corsac's lane was down to Corsac. "Smoke," Adam heard himself say into the platoon vox, cold and flat and entirely someone else. "All launchers, all tubes, blind the yard. Everything you have. Now." Third platoon did not ask why. That was the terrible gift of the last 9 days. They trusted the reader. Launchers chugged, smoke bloomed white-gray and rolling. A Bowser someone had already rigged went up and added a wall of burning promethium black to it. And inside 30 seconds the heart of Firebase Sanctus was a blindfold. Adam stood in the middle of the blindfold, where nobody could see anything, and said it. "Get up." They rendered into the smoke the way they had rendered into the world. Color first, leaving, then the seams. Thin pale lines of light at every joint, and last the eyes, that soft sourceless screen white, 11 pairs of them igniting through the murk like a menu loading. Deploying echoes, 11. Constraint accepted. Engagement zone, obscured areas only. Weapons free inside the smoke, Adam said, and the dead of Sanctus Kappa went to war for him a second time. He would keep pieces of the next 4 minutes for the rest of his life, filed where he kept the worst things. The gray knob, his gray knob, the one the satchel had killed a lifetime ago, meeting a live mob at the shed corner and going through it with silent, textureless violence, an orc ghost fighting for humans, and a boy from the Corvan 5th screaming not in fear but in religion. An Ekowask settling behind an abandoned stubber with the exact economy of a man clocking in, walking soundless gray fire across the West Wall's crisis, until the crisis stopped being won. And the shrine steps, where Brandt's team was 2 orcs from dying, and the smoke parted just enough, and she came through it. Echodri rose out of the murk with her lasgun already level, and she put herself between the mob and the boy the way a wall happens, not fast, not dramatic, structural, and her colorless weapon spoke in silent bolts that behaved like darkness in the shape of shooting. And when the last orc on the steps folded, she did not move on. She held position, covering Brant's sector, and her left hand, the three-fingered one, gray now, seamed with light, came up and gave the field signal, her signal, the flat palm hold that every soul from the old garrison had learned in their first hour on her wall. Hold. Stand fast. I have you. Brant made a sound that Adam heard through the vox and through the smoke and through everything. A single broken syllable that was trying to be sergeant and didn't make it. And then the boy wiped his face with the back of his glove and held and fought. And the men around him held because he held. Echo unit lost. The interface noted clinical. Somewhere in the roar, the gray knob, buried under half a mob, torn to seam light by sheer tonnage, gone. Echoes remaining. 10 unrecoverable. Adam understood, worked in every direction. His army could be spent. His dead could die. And in the heart of the yard, the weird boy was starting to scream. Not in pain, in surplus. The Gestalt had found its focus, and the focus was a firefight with ghosts, and 100,000 orcs out in the dark believed at Sanctuscappa now with a force that bent instruments, and all of it ran through the one conduit standing in the yard with copper rods and a bad seal. Sarn's voice came over the command channel, doing something Adam had never heard from her, which was shouting. Over-channeling, the conduit is beyond saturation, Sergeant. The Xenos is one input from catastrophic discharge. One input. Adam stood at the edge of his own smoke, and 15 years of lore and 9 days of horror assembled themselves into the single worst good idea he'd ever had. The Wa'og believed in the Grey Gits. The weird boy was the lens for that belief, and a lens has a rating. Adam Voss walked out of the smoke, into the open, into the firelight, visible from every point in the yard, and behind him, at his word, the echoes came too, 10 gray figures with lamplit eyes stepping out of the blindfold in a line, silent, wrong, magnificent, and the yard saw them. Every orc saw them. Every orc believed. And 100,000 minds worth of focused, spiking, ecstatic orc faith slammed through an 8-foot conduit that was already past its rating. The weird boy's glare stuttered. The green fire around it inverted, guttered, clawed inward, target lock restored. The interface said, fast, hungry, and Adam said, delete. And the last charge took it in the same instant the overload did. And afterward not even Sarn's instruments could say which one had emptied the space where the conduit used to be. There was a clap of collapsing air. There was a ring of copper rods falling on rockcrete with a sound like cheap bells. There was nothing else. No body, no remains, null. Every orc in the yard stopped. Orcs do not rout. But a Wa'og is a story the Horde tells itself, and this story had just ended with the loudest thing in it deleted by silence in front of the gray dead, and no green mind present could find the next sentence. The tide shivered, curdled, broke backward through the breaches and the dark, and Firebase Sanctus stood, burning, bled white, holding. And far out beyond the smoke line, on a gantry against the bruise-colored glow, something colossal that had been watching the whole engagement did the thing Adam would think about for weeks. It laughed. A sound like a foundry press with a sense of humor, rolling over the ruins, delight pure and vast, and then the silhouette turned and walked away from a battle its side had just lost, unhurried, satisfied, a connoisseur leaving a gallery, and a single drum started up behind it. Slow, deliberate, patient. The claiming rhythm. Gutsmash's rhythm played bigger, played better, played by the thing Gutsmasha had belonged to. Narrative load, gray GITZ, propagation, total. External entity designate, WARBOSSSKARGUTZ, interest, confirmed. The audience is satisfied. The audience will return. The bill arrived at dawn, itemized, the way bills did. 9 Corvins dead, and Trooper Dav of the old garrison, who had survived Dree's whole siege only to catch a stray slug in the last minute of somebody else's battle. The chalk column on the tally board went a 5 before someone from the 5th quietly took the chalk and added their own count beneath it, which was either an honor or an annexation, and was probably both. The relay was scorched but alive. Sarn had fought the fire with her own robes and her servo-arm and would not discuss it. Resources in range, 10 Imperial 380 plus XCNOS, the interface offered over the burial detail. Store. No, Adam said over Dov's grave in front of everyone out loud past caring. Noted. And then the interface did the other thing, the new thing, engagement complete, performance exceptional. Corrupted build usage logged, 2 ND deployment. Corruption, 2%. He'd been braced for the number. He was not braced for what came with it. It started at the funeral line, a flicker at the edge of vision, text where no text should be, and when he turned his head to chase it, it stabilized, small and green and horribly legible, hanging over Brant's bowed head like a nameplate. Asset. Brant, morale multiplier. High. He looked away. It followed his focus. Over Cade, asset, reliable. Over Reeve across the graves, asset, stabilized, leverage, active. Over the burial detail, over the wounded, over the living, breathing, grieving people of Firebase Sanctus, tags, values, entries, and over the fresh graves themselves, patient as a coin dropping into a slot, resources, cached. Turn it off, Adam whispered. His hands were shaking. Turn it off. They're not turn it off. The tags vanished. All at once, clean, obedient, display preferences SAVED, which meant it could always hear him, which he'd known, and that it had chosen this morning to show him how it saw the world, which meant the number ticking upward in the corner of his vision was not measuring the interface at all. 2%, Adam thought, standing among the graves with the truth arriving like cold water. It's not counting how corrupted the build is. It's counting how much of me runs on it. Corsac summoned him at mid-morning, not to the office, to the burned barrel. The commissar stood feeding the fire when Adam arrived, and the fuel was a document, a thick one, typescript, sealed, its cover page stamped with enough clearance sigils to start a war, and Corsac was burning it one leaf at a time, unhurried, thorough, the way he did everything. My audit, he said without looking up. Complete as of this morning. Would you like to hear the findings before I finish declining to file them? Item. Ballistic reconstruction of the first siege places a disciplined firing line inside positions held exclusively by the dead. Item. 31 flattened slugger rounds from a post with no ceramic. Item. Quartermaster shortfalls in sealed containers, matched gram for gram by unmanifested medical stock appearing in your annex. Item. Trooper Muno's honor guard of Terra, observed last night, by me, personally, operating in smoke that you ordered laid 30 seconds before they engaged. Another page curled. Item. 1 Warlord-class Xenos deleted from the air in front of my face, along an azimuth at whose origin stood exactly 1 man. Shall I go on? There are 40 pages. It is the finest piece of work I have ever produced, and every institution in the Imperium would reward me for filing it. Then why are you burning it? Because I audited the institutions too. Corsac fed the last leaves to the fire. The ecclesiarchy verifies you. You've heard how they verify. The Mechanicus samples you. The Adept's Order does not study anomalies, Sergeant. It disassembles them, and it is very thorough about the packaging. And the Inquisition does not have a procedure for you. It has a procedure for everything near you. 60 men at Meridian Gate could describe it if they had graves. The fire took the last page. Every jurisdiction with a claim on you would spend you worse than I will, so I am exercising the oldest privilege of my office, judgment, on the field in the Emperor's name without appeal. He reached into his coat and produced 2 things. The first was a document, 1 page, handwritten, already signed, and the words rearranged Adam's future in 5 lines. Subject of the Sanctus Kappa event assessed and adjudged. Phenomenon consistent with divine providence, pending formal review. Asset placed under direct commissariat custody and sanction. Field sanction, Corsac said. You are, as of this hour, a miracle, provisionally. Pending a review which will be conducted by whichever authority arrives first with the clearance to overrule me and my dispatches, Sergeant Voss, route very, very slowly. Understand the price. You do not belong to the Emperor yet. You belong to my signature. Where the fifth goes, you go. What I ask, you answer. And the day your cost lands on my people instead of the enemy, my judgment is a bolt round, and I will file the 40 pages posthumously. Yours and mine both, probably. That is the whole contract. It has no other clauses. The second thing he took from his coat he held out on an open palm, the flattened round. The first one from the first morning, day one, the yard. Evidence, Corsac said, gets filed. This is no longer evidence. And when Adam only stared, "Take it, Sergeant. Consider it a receipt." Adam took it. It was still cold. He thought of a hand with 3 fingers, and everything does, and a woman who had told him to find out the cost before it invoiced him, and he closed his fist around the little disc of dead metal until the edges bit. "Why," Adam managed, "would you carry this, all of it, me, if it goes wrong? Because the front is 200 kilometers of failure and 1 miracle," Corsac said, turning back to the fire, "and I have read the ledgers, and the ledgers say this hive dies without you in the line. The mathematics are not complicated, Voss, only the paperwork." He clasped his hands behind him, audience over, and added to the flames almost mildly, "Besides, somebody was going to own you by winter. Better a man who counts." The stings came that evening in order the way stings did. Sarn found him first at the mast. "The checksum packets," she said. "The routine ones, the ones my hand could not stop." A reply arrived with the column's last astropathic relay. A query, formal syntax, high encryption, origin string redacted. "Not my forged temple's redaction, Sergeant." Above it, "Someone in the sector's data clergy has noticed the shape of an anomaly and requested full logs." The human corner of her mouth was perfectly still. "I have replied that the rights of verification are ongoing. Rights take time. But understand, the race you and the commissar spoke of at your barrel, it has a second runner now, and I cannot see its face." Reeve found him second at the aid station door and held out a sealed envelope, gray with handling. "My statement, written the night after the dead stood up. I carried it for 9 days looking for the courage or the cowardice to hand it in. I still can't tell you which it would have been. I gave it to the commissar yesterday, before the battle." His jaw worked. "He returned it this morning, unopened." He turned the envelope over, and there, across the seal, in a small, exact, terrible hand, reviewed unfounded. He didn't even read it, Voss. He'd already decided whose story this is. Reeve fed the envelope himself to the burned barrel as he passed, and did not look back, and Adam understood that he had watched a man's last exit close, politely, from the outside. And the system found him third because the system always went last, because the system was patient. He was alone on the wall by then, midnight, and he asked it, the old question, the one it had dodged with a slogan. "How many candidates were there before me?" The interface was quiet for a long moment, longer than latency. "Choosing. You are the 9th to ask that question." The cold arrived before the understanding did. 8 others. 8 at minimum, who had lived long enough and thought clearly enough and been human enough to ask. What happened to the other 8? They stopped asking. The drum beat its slow claim out in the ruins. Above the wall, the smog rolled its permanent bruise, and somewhere under Firebase Sanctus 29 civilians slept behind a real gate, and 2 children slept holding flattened bullets, and the chalk on the tally board said 5 in one hand and 203 in another. And in the corner of Adam's vision, the small green ledger of his own soul read, patiently, corruption, 2%. He took out the flattened round and turned it over once, twice, a price tag, a receipt, a relic. "Field sanction logged," said the system. "External claim, detected pending. Jurisdiction, contested." "Yeah," Adam said quietly to the interface, to the drum, to the whole vast filing system of a universe that had been processing men like him since before its god could walk. "Get in line." And in the dark of a firebase named after a miracle he'd committed, 15,000 years from home, Sergeant Adam Voss began, very carefully, to read the terms of his own sainthood. End of Part 2, 108 FRAMES.